Well, here's a happy little pick-me-up for the dead of winter. Better than food, man. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Get that coffee. David Lynch coffee today. A gift from one of my best friends and a supporter of the show, Brian. Thank you very much, buddy. Really appreciate it. Delicious. Can't tell what it is. Just got something. Does anybody out there know how to get a Swiss visa easily for not much money? Hope you're all staying safe out there. You know, even though there's like 10 different kinds of stupid crazy right outside the door, it's okay. You're always welcome here. And I'll keep showing up to create a calm space for adults. Today's episode is sponsored by the Ridge Wallet. These things are awesome. They're light, sleek, industrial. It's an awesome minimalist design. It's like why we moved from flip phones to smartphones, but we still carry the same kind of wallet. They're just slightly bigger than your credit card, and yet they're so sturdy. It's designed to easily fit into your front pocket. It doesn't fold or awkwardly bulge in your back pocket, and it has seriously changed up my whole pocket situation and freed up some much needed space. For books, of course. It's really unobtrusive, it's comfortable to wear, I've never lost it. Very easy to use, holds up to 12 cards plus room for cash on the back. The durable material means that each wallet comes with a lifetime warranty. You're literally never going to need another wallet in your life. This is the last one you need to buy. You could buy this one wallet and carry it for life. In fact, the Ridge team is so confident you'll like it, they'll let you test drive it for 45 days. You can send it back for a full refund if you don't love it. It also has RFID blocking technology, which protects you from digital pickpockets. It's definitely a plus for me. There are over 30 colors and styles, including carbon fiber and burnt titanium. This one here is my go-to. It's simple. It's the matte black titanium. I've had it for months. It's been holding up great. This wasn't enough to win you over? Check out their 30,000 5-star reviews. Get 10% off your order today with free worldwide shipping and returns by going to ridge.com/betterthanfood and using the discount code betterthanfood. The link is below. Thanks a bunch. Also, I just want to point out I am now on ODYSEE, which is this awesome crypto-based YouTube alternative platform. It's like old YouTube with less censorship and ads. I think if you're a creator on there, the more views you get, the more crypto you receive or something like that. I'm still figuring it out, but it's really neat. I left the link below. Check it out. Also, thank you so much to the new patrons. You're helping make this possible. I sincerely appreciate it. Certainly motivation to try and get more patron exclusive content out there as well. Thanks of course to the longtime supporters as well. You've been incredibly generous and I'm very grateful. Thank you. Well, here's a happy little pick-me-up for the dead of winter. Today is No Longer Human by Shuji Tsushima, otherwise known by his pen name Osamu Dazai. This was published by New Directions. I'm partially sponsored by them. They send me free books from time to time. They're wonderful people. They've published an amazing amount of incredible literature. I highly suggest you check them out. This one I picked up on my own though. They did not send this to me. I've been meaning to read this for a very long time, years. Osamu Dazai was a Japanese writer born to a well-to-do family who wrote this book, which is now considered a classic of Japanese literature. He famously drowned himself with a woman. They tied a kimono sash to each other and jumped in. Their bodies were discovered on what would have been his 39th birthday. I have to warn you, especially these days, that this is a magnificently depressing book, potentially. Personally, I found it more fascinating than depressing, although it certainly is so, but it's actually surprisingly not hopeless. I think there's a difference. See, I think Welbeck's Serotonin actually had way more of a doom feeling for me. That was a pretty like there's no escape in that one. That's just like a hopeless novel. I'm trying to think exactly about why that is, because it's fascinating to intuit that difference. No Longer Human is the most accurate depiction of true depression and anxiety that I've come across. The kind in which the person suffering initially is actually not at fault, but rather there's something in their constitution, it seems, in their mind that is destroying them. And without question, in my experience, this is the most 100% accurate depiction I've come across, to a T. So this is a kind of confessional found document narrative about a man named Yozo, who suffers from what I would call extreme social anxiety and depression, very much in his head, incapable with relating to people in a normal manner, masking it with humor by being kind of a clown. He would like to become a painter, but eventually just draws comics and becomes a comic book artist. And he eventually becomes a kind of womanizing, dissolute alcoholic and finally a heroin addict, just sort of moving from one substance to the other to try and escape the pain. He makes several suicide attempts in the book. The first time, I believe, he tries with another woman. They jump into the ocean, I think, near Kamakura. She drowns and he survives, much to his embarrassment. So while he's still alive, he kind of starts to commit suicide in slow motion, so to speak. with his actions and decisions and his substance abuse. His drinking is nauseatingly excessive. While all of this is outrageously dark and depressing, I know, because of the manner of the book, the style and the way it's written, it's so conversational and kind of tempered with good writing and relatable thoughts and anecdotes, almost friendly, that you really don't come away feeling as though you've been burdened with the self-inflicted pain of the narrator. It's not like that. You know, it's difficult to describe the plot, to summarize it without one jumping to that conclusion. But it's not perhaps what you think. And that is really, you know, I was expecting something else. I thought, you know, it actually reminded me a little bit of The Blind Owl as I was just describing it right now. I reviewed that for patrons. I wasn't a fan of that book, really. I thought it was okay, but it just wasn't, it was really, really mopey. And that was also by a guy who did kill himself by drowning himself in a river. No, excuse me, he gassed himself in his apartment in Paris. Yeah, he tried to kill himself by jumping into a river, but like Dazai, actually, he was rescued. Although Dazai did it with another woman and then did it again with another woman. By Hedayat, he did it by himself. There is a similarity to it. Hedayat's novel is much more surreal. There's an odd kind of deceptive pleasantness to Dazai's writing. It's creepy. He's very polite in his execution of these ideas. It's kind of matter of fact, which is more disturbing than Hedayat in a way, because Hedayat is really trying to lay on the drama of the pain that he's going through, of the inner torment. And while certainly Dazai kind of goes in that direction at some points, it's pretty subdued, really, which makes it disturbing. It really reads as though it's coming from somebody who's sort of just made the discovery, or thinks they've made the discovery, that they really are outside of what most people would call human, which is somebody who is unable to relate with and kind of truly understand people, other people. Really quick, if you're enjoying this video, if you could hit the thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it. Helps the algorithm get this video to people who would enjoy this book. So, thank you, truly. It's misanthropic, but it's quietly misanthropic. It's not violently misanthropic, unlike anything else I think I've ever read. Mishima comes close. We're going to talk about that because they actually met. More on that in a bit. This is a novel about despair, total self-despair. The most disturbing thing about the book is the sincerity with which Yozo describes his condition. I think it would be very easy to kind of shrug off his misanthropic viewpoint with which he presents himself and the world, but there's something highly unusual and unique at play. He's not obnoxious. He's occasionally callous to women. He treats them terribly. Though oddly, my impression was that he actually feels way more comfortable around women than men. He's not like Dostoevsky's underground man, and he's not as cynical as a Welbeck character. He's not actively trying to foist his misery upon others by destroying them. Instead, he seeks to destroy his pain with substances, at any cost, really. I think it's also very worth mentioning the time period and events around this novel. This is like directly after World War II. Tokyo and Japan have just been decimated in the unbelievably ironically named Pacific War. Scorched earth bombings. I mean, true carnage. Absolute and unfathomable destruction. Unfathomable. It's astounding that the country has come back as well as it has and how incredible they've done. Because you just look at photos of this place and it is just unreal. What we did to that country was just ghastly, doesn't even begin to describe it. We have no comparison. We have no clue, you know. Almost total destruction. Dazai's house apparently burned down twice in the raids during, I think it was Operation Meeting House, where you can just look up photos. It's just hideous. So I think for many, this period looked like, and probably really was, in a big sense, the end of the world. I don't think we can quite grasp the apocalyptic nature of it. I don't think we have anything close. What he is, Yozo, he's the most convincing rendering of somebody who is absolutely baffled by the actions of human beings that I've ever seen. A tragic alien. Dysfunctional doesn't even begin to cut it. What starts out as an inability to come to terms with himself and the world around him leads to alcohol, vomiting blood, losing teeth, heroin, and a kind of solipsistic insanity that eventually leads him to a sanatorium. While all of this sounds unbelievably brutal and filled with dramatic pain, what is striking and consistent is the tone of the writing, which is very subdued, quiet, matter-of-fact, and polite, in kind of a stunning contrast to the events being described. And yeah, somehow this makes the novel truly disturbing. the calm manner in which this man is delivering the darkest anecdotes of his life. Multiple suicide attempts and worse. Just truly abysmal behavior and thoughts. You want to try and help someone like this. You want to try and pick them up or give them a kind of encouragement that will unlock their self-drive or motivation for self-improvement. But at the end of the day, it's a hideous truth that indeed we are all alone in this. And as life is often ridiculously difficult for those who are in their right minds, society's patience is thin. And that's the final tragedy of the story. Like the old woman in the epilogue says regarding Yozo, when asked if she cried when reading the notebooks, she replies, "No, I didn't cry. I just kept thinking that when human beings get that way, they're no good for anything." Maybe one of the darkest moments in literary history. Whether or not you agree with that statement, that is, I'd argue, the prevailing sentiment after you reach a certain point or depth. And that's not something to be happy about or okay with. Not at all, but that is the dark truth, it seems. Society's sympathy with outsiders and failures is quite limited. It's not very sympathetic. Not at all. And it's getting worse in some ways, I'd say. Even though he's doing much of it himself through these decisions, you can't always sympathize, but sometimes you can understand, you can see how he reached these conclusions, how he came to these decisions. And it complicates things. There's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of gray area regarding human nature in this book. I think a lot of people are going to just be tempted to write it off and be like, well, it sucks to be you, basically. But that's just cowardly, you know? I mean, there's something actually here to explore. There's something really smart, actually. And to brush it off, to just kind of callously turn your back on it and just hope it goes away just because it isn't affecting you would be very unwise, in my opinion. Because the chances are, there are a lot of people out there who can relate to this book. And the really disturbing thing is that these days, there's probably a lot more of them. Much of it seems to be autobiographical, as Dazai himself appeared to be a womanizing alcoholic who did attempt suicide, and the accompanying woman did die, and he did not, leading him to be disowned by his family. I really enjoyed it, if one can say that. It's a weird word to use for this, but I really enjoyed it because it doesn't oppress the reader, which I thought The Blind Owl totally did, but is instead very conversational and seemingly honest or sincere about unbelievably difficult truths. Very, very difficult things to put in words. The story is bookended with kind of a found document sort of setup, wherein a man is given several notebooks and some photos, I think, and the book is created from these. Dazai is like writing his life story in here after his suicide, basically. It's a little meta, actually, thinking about it now, because he's writing this stranger, get these notebooks from another stranger, and in these notebooks are the story of his life, which he's writing about. It's bizarre. He's writing about it as if he's a ghost, which kind of like, it kind of adds another perspective on the title, No Longer Human. I don't know, it's interesting. He also paints these ghostly portraits. It's all kind of coming together. So in the prologue, the man who discovers these notebooks describes seeing the main character, Yozo, as a boy. And the way he describes these photos is probably one of the most eerily disturbing and just genuinely frightening passages I've ever read. I don't know why. It was just deeply, deeply unsettling. Kind of almost like a look behind you kind of fear. I couldn't tell you why. I couldn't replicate the technique, although maybe I should try. I just know my reaction to those descriptions was one of horror and understanding. It was nearly Lovecraftian in its execution, right? That sense of building dread. You really could not ask for a better intro to set the tone. It describes the photos of this young boy who is a fraud, who has learned to smile and behave in a certain way out of a desperate need to kind of keep the world at bay, to stop the gulf or chasm from opening up and swallowing him in anxiety. It describes a child who is in what seems to be like a perpetual state of fear, right? After the notebooks finish, you know, you go through the story, which is composed of these, I think, 3 notebooks maybe, and there's the epilogue. The epilogue turns out to be the moment when this stranger discovers the notebooks, when he's given the notebooks. The end is actually the beginning, which is also the end. The end of Yozo's life and the beginning of the book, the construction of the book, so to speak, if that makes sense. Again, kind of meta. Dazai is clever, there's no question. In many ways, our day-to-day life is frequently deception. Our relationships are filled with positive deceit, wherein we lie to each other to not confuse or offend the other party. Our inner motivations and drives and thoughts are unknown and hidden if we are behaving properly, in order to maintain stability and keep things working in a social way. Yozo has never understood the ability to deceive and be okay with it. As he illustrates in the book, I am convinced that human life is filled with many pure, happy, serene examples of insincerity, truly splendid of their kind, of people deceiving one another without, strangely enough, any wounds being inflicted, of people who seem unaware even that they are deceiving one another. But I have no interest in instances of mutual deception. I myself spent the whole day long deceiving human beings with my clowning. I have not been able to work up much concern over the morality prescribed in textbooks of ethics under such names as righteousness. I find it difficult to understand the kind of human being who lives, or who is sure he can live, purely, happily, serenely, while engaged in deceit. Human beings never did teach me that abstruse secret. If I had only known that one thing, I should never have had to dread human beings so, nor should I have opposed myself to human life, nor tasted such torments of hell every night. Well, it gets a little dramatic there by the end, but you get it. Yeah, it is a little narcissistic and pretentious, most definitely. But I mean, I think all confessional writing in kind of like negative tones comes off that way. So if you're into it, then you are. If not, then skip it. That's sort of par for the course when you have depressed individuals who are trying to sort of empower themselves by, according to them, revealing the hypocrisy of others. It's a recurring theme. Osamu Dazai was known for being a womanizer and an alcoholic, just like the protagonist of the book. Even without being depressed or anxious, I think there is plenty of you out there, myself included among you, who will be able to relate with Dazai. But some of you, though you can, may have a strong feeling of repulsion, not unlike the reaction of Yukio Mishima. Mishima actually once met Dazai, like I mentioned in a video not too long ago. And here is a hell of an interesting moment. These two Japanese authors, both absolute masters of the craft, rare, prodigious talents come face to face. One who will shortly commit suicide, Dazai, and the other who will commit suicide later. And both of these guys commit suicide in ways that are quite dramatic. Dazai's suicide wasn't the reason for Mishima's, but it definitely inspired it. I paraphrased this anecdote in that last video and I got it wrong. So here's the actual event for all y'all. I'm going to read the whole thing because I think it's actually quite important. This is from Mishima's biography by John Nathan. And what's funny is this contains the most concise and generous description of Dazai that I've come across. So let's check it out, page 91. Yet if any single incident was likely to have contributed to Mishima's awakening, not from his fantasies but to their significance, it was the suicide of the novelist Osamu Dazai in June 1948. Dazai was a brilliant and above all a passionate writer bent from the beginning of his career on self-destruction. His fundamental despair about himself led him in the course of his life to a passionate indulgence in every brand of dissipation. He was a notorious womanizer, an alcoholic, a drug addict. Into each of his weaknesses he flung himself headlong, hating himself for his indulgence and unable to abstain, repeatedly reaching the conclusion, which was the title of his last book, that he was no longer human. From his very first work in the mid-30s, in which he wrote of his affair with a Tokyo bar girl and their attempted lovers' suicide, in which only the girl died and Dazai survived to shame his family and hate himself, his theme and method were the passionate documentation of self-despair. For the devoted millions who read him amid the rubble of their own lives, Dazai, more than any other writer, was a spokesman of the age, a popular hero who, albeit he always reached the same desperate conclusion about himself, continued to struggle against his fate. In June 1948, having published a series of best-selling novels, Dazai finally did what all his heroes had either attempted or seriously considered. He tied himself to his mistress with a kimono sash and jumped into the Setagaya Reservoir, leaving behind a wife and 3 children. Mishima's only meeting with Dazai in January 1947 is now a famous incident in Japanese literary history. A circle of fledgling writers had persuaded Dazai to join them for an afternoon of talk and drinking. At the time when the only alcohol available was a murderous rice whiskey distilled from dregs, a young poet in the group had obtained several half-gallon bottles of rice wine, sake, and this was the bait. And if you read No Longer Human, you'll see, like, alcohol is most definitely a priority, so this is quite believable. He describes, like, I think a hangover from gin that he's drinking as like having like broken glass in your head or something in the book, and that was a pretty accurate description. Mishima went along with a young playwright named Yashiro, an avid admirer of Dazai's. Mishima, who did not drink, sat stiffly apart watching in silence, of course. Abruptly, during a drunken lull in the conversation, he moved forward to confront Dazai, looked him straight in the eye and said, smiling, "I don't like your writing." According to Mishima, describing the encounter 16 years later, Dazai peered at my face and then drew back slightly, looking as if he had been caught off his guard. But he recovered instantly and, turning halfway toward Kamai, said to no one in particular, "But he's here, isn't he? So he must think I'm pretty good. He must like what I do, otherwise he wouldn't be here." The playwright Yashiro says that this exchange, or one very like it, did occur. He remembers that Mishima left shortly afterward, and that a few days later he came to tell him that his association with a man like that could only do him harm. In Mishima's account, he writes that he had gone to see Dazai expressly to tell him to his face that he disliked him, and describes himself arriving with a dagger hidden in the folds of his robes like a terrorist. Specifically, he abhors Dazai's shameless self-caricature, the affected Christ-like face visible behind every page, his confident pride that he was representative of the malaise of the age. In short, Dazai's glorification of despair. But Mishima does not stop with listing the qualities in Dazai he cannot abide. He seeks to explain why they so repulsed him. Naturally, I recognize Dazai's rare talent, and yet I know of no other writer who, from my very first contact with him, filled me with so violent a physiological revulsion. Possibly, this was due to my immediate sense that Dazai was a writer at pains to expose precisely that which I most wanted to conceal in myself. Ain't that something? What this suggests, very likely the truth, is that Mishima was beginning to locate in himself the same self-destructive impulses he saw in Dazai, and was converting the terror of this self-awakening to a hatred of the other man. Indeed. Great story, I thought. In a final twist of fate, Dazai indeed himself may have been inspired to commit suicide just as his literary idol did, Ryunosuke Akutagawa, who I haven't read, but I would like to. So as you can see, influenced all the way down the line. Dark stuff. Like the translator Donald Keene says in the introduction, No Longer Human is not a cheerful book, yet its effect is far from that of a painful wound gratuitously inflicted on the reader. As a reviewer, Richard Gilman in Jubilee, wrote of Dazai's earlier novel, such is the power of art to transfigure what is objectively ignoble or depraved, that The Setting Sun is actually deeply moving and even inspiriting, to know the nature of despair, and to triumph over it in the ways that are possible to oneself. Imagination was Dazai's only weapon. Is surely a sort of grace. It's pretty good. I agree with that. What I took from this book is that nobody chooses to be this way. They only choose ways that seem to make the pain and anxiety stop for a period of time, but that eventually exacerbate the original issue even further, leading into a downward spiral, trapped inside themselves and unable to stand it. I think I appreciated the quick-moving, minimalistic, confessional style more than anything. I think the soft-spoken, self-deprecating tone still feels modern and authentic, even if the author is a liar. He's crafted this particular novel in a way that still feels fresh and just as disturbing, I imagine, as when it first appeared. So better than food, for sure. So what did I dislike about the book? Nothing. It was a great read. I was prepared to be repulsed in sort of a Mishima-like way with the mopiness of the character, but I wasn't at all. In fact, in spite of all the god-awful events occurring during the reading of this book, it felt like an excoriating, brutally honest portrayal. So you should read it. Yeah, if you enjoy Yukio Mishima's Confessions of a Mask, Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, or Novel with Cocaine by M. Adjiev, Russian author, really cool, and anything by Michel Houellebecq, I highly recommend you get your hands on this ASAP. If you liked Epitaph of a Small Winter as well, you might enjoy this. But it is depressing, and it is a dark time. So if you're one of those people who feels better reading dark material during dark times, like somebody's kind of like telling the truth that nobody else is, it might be up your alley. That's me. Coffee time. For those of you who are new, I take all the names of the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more per video to the show, and I place their names in this mason jar, and I pull out a name for every review I do, and I send whoever's name I pull out a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee, normally roasted by yours truly, but lately, because of the lockdown and pandemic, roasted by one of the wonderful roasters here in Portland, Oregon. And the coffee is delicious. And it's good to help support small business. So if you would like to get in on that, you can head over to the link below, or go to patreon.com/booksarebetterthanfood and donate $5 or more per video. I sincerely appreciate it. $1 or more will get you access to the Patreon-only reviews, the Discord channel, and the Better Than Friday newsletter that I send out, which is just a list of 5 different things I'm interested in at any given time. Could be books in the pipeline, music, films, articles, changes week to week. If you think we have similar taste, I think you will get a lot of value out of that. And you will get a lot of value out of the Discord, because there's a lot of great recommendations in that group. And some funny guys, some funny stuff. It's pretty dope. So if you need some stuff to listen to, watch, read, then stop by and say hello. Unfortunately, international shipping is not included. Sorry about that. A great free way to help the show would be to give a thumbs up or subscribe, or both if you're feeling mighty generous. It certainly helps the algorithm. And also, if you're shopping on Amazon for anything at all, if you use the link below to get there, the show gets a kickback from whatever you purchase at no cost to you, and I really appreciate it. Again, totally free for you. I sold that from this guy on YouTube called The Modern Investor. I think he's got exceptional manners. Also, really quick note for patrons, all these reviews are ad-free. Just letting you know. Thank you very much to all the new patrons, the old patrons. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Best of luck. All right, here we go. Chris R. Thanks a bunch, Chris. Really appreciate it. You're going to receive No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai, plus some delicious coffee. Thanks a bunch. Hope you enjoy. Great to see you as always. Please always remember to bring a book wherever you go. Though these days you might not want to go outside very much. It's kind of crazy out there. Great to see you as always. Take care of yourselves. Have a good night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.